Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our Education USA Canada presentation of Writing a Strong Letter of Recommendation. Education USA is funded by the U.S. Department of State, and we provide free advising resources to students and to guidance counselors. Our goal is to help you understand the U.S. admissions process and to provide unbiased advice on narrowing down a student's search for universities and to help with the overall application process. My name is Jenica Heim, and my email address is ottawa@educationusa.info. All my information will also be at the end of this presentation. You can reach out to me at any time with any questions you have about this presentation or anything else in the application process. Today, we're being joined by Christy Graham. She's the Director of International Recruitment at Samford University, which is located in Alabama. She's going to give you a lot of great information about writing the letter of recommendation, and she's going to be a great expert resource for you today. So please feel free to ask questions throughout, but also we'll have some time at the end for that. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Christy. Thank you, Christy, for being here, and go ahead and take it away.
Glad that you guys have joined, and thanks for letting me hop in and speak a little bit about recommendation letters. You probably love writing them as much as we love reading them, and so any input that we can get from you about that process, and certainly hope the input we give today on writing them will help as you walk through this next year in the application process with your students. So feel free, as Jenica said, to ask questions, and we'll make sure we get as many of those answered as possible. So I pulled up the slide. Our first slide is really just going to go over what why we have recommendation letters to begin with. That was when I first started. I asked that question: why do we really have them? And an interesting perspective on this is that it really allows, in a non-robotic test-taking way, for personalization. It humanizes our students that you serve and that we are hoping to get, and it gives obviously a little bit of personal information about them, character, values, the addition and asset that they would be to the institution that they're looking at coming to, and all of those are great indicators for any institution beyond just the measurables that are standard, the test scores, the academic record, and a leadership resume, that sort of thing. And so we do them and we require them really because it allows for that extra added personalization beyond just the methodical academic record that is required as well. So it's a great chance for you to highlight your students. And then I've got little starbursts, we call them secret sauce in our office, about a few things in our presentation that we'll go over today. And so this is one of them, is that recommendation letters, while they may be tiring for you to do on a regular basis, really allow the humanization and the personality of the student in a way that no other opportunity can. Many times their essays have to do with an experience that they had or something that impacted them, but it doesn't really reflect their personality academically or socially the way that a recommendation letter can. So keep that in mind as you slog through them, that they're really important aspect of what we see in part of the whole of the student. Best practices, some basic best practices for recommendation letters include descriptors that are not listed in a leadership resume. And then we've got a little tip in a minute about that. Spell check. I encounter a lot of interesting spelling, and for most of us who have computers, that's a pretty easy option, spell check on a document. And so that's something that's really appropriate to remember. Ensure the name of the student is spelled correctly. We want to make sure that we honor the student and the spelling of their name as much as possible. And part of that is helping us to match up in the recommendation letter process with their file. And so every now and then we have a student whose name is spelled incorrectly and we have a hard time matching up their file, or we can accidentally match it to the wrong file, and we really don't want to do that. And so the spelling of their name is important, not just to honor them, but to help us make sure that the recommendation letter gets in the right place. And then another really important best practice is ensuring that the letters are uploaded directly from you to the Common App or sent directly to the institution. And this is really a great best practice because it leaves the student beyond reproach. And it also really assures your institution, your school and the institution, that their letters are coming to the right place. So that's probably one of the biggest best practices that we talk about, is ensuring that the students do not send those recommendation letters. We just, we'd have no way of knowing if any changes were made or what things could have been altered and revised. And then one of the best practices is just following an outline for those letters versus a template. And that's really important, especially in the personalization of your student and helping to explain their character and there's the social asset that they would bring, the academic asset that they would bring to the institution. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. An outline versus a template, and we really talked to counselors a good bit about this, using an outline instead of a template where you just remove names and fill in a name for the next student. Part of an outline would include some similar things to a template, but a little bit more, such as introducing the student with a character or content descriptors, an organization that they were part of, a character trait that just really stands out to you or that defines them in what they do at school. Include how you've interacted with them. Have you been involved in a club or an organization with them? Or do you have a reference from a teacher that has been? How has that student impacted the school or a student or two through their involvement in that organization? And then add references from other staff and faculty. And this is one that is really sort of a golden nugget that's hidden many times, is that every now and then we'll get a recommendation letter that has a reference from another faculty member. And it really is strong, because if it's obviously the recommendation letter come from you, an adult, a staff or teacher from the school, and then an additional reference from another faculty person, just 1 or 2 lines, is really strong in helping to understand the personality and the context of the student. And then importantly, qualify why the student would be a good fit at our institution or the institution you're recommending them for, and how they would succeed in the classroom. And so those 4 blocks, if you look at them in a block segment of the context, and then how you've interacted with them, references if those apply, and then how they would be a good fit. Most of those, the top 3, the reference may or may not be something that you're able to do, but those top 3 things really help in an outline form for you to hit some things without having to think up, goodness, what on earth can I add for this student? But if you have an outline of 3 things to hit, then that really helps you to provide good content without having to just take the name out of the student and use a template in that manner. We have found that using a template sometimes really does not help the student, because while it does fulfill the requirement for a recommendation letter, it does not always tell us anything about the student that would be helpful in the application process. And so templates can be good and they do save time, but it does help in a review committee to really see who the student is from someone that is an adult that's an outsider. Let's go to the next. Jenna, gosh, I skipped ahead. There we go. Some recommendation letter tips, and this is our secret sauce tip. Keep an index card of synonyms for academic success, such as diligence, either focused, independent, responsible, organized, intelligent. And then keep a separate list of social success measures. They're discerning, endearing, self-disciplined, determined, have maturity, interpersonal skills, creative, that sort of thing. And when you begin this process of archiving sort of great synonyms for these words, not only does it save you a lot of time, but it really can help the descriptor of the student better when you've got basically, a secret sauce recipe card for great words like that, and saves you time and really helps describe the student better. So all around, that's a great indicator and time saver for you. So that's something that we have a couple of counselors we've recommended to, and it's just really helped them. And don't be afraid to share it. If you end up delegating several recommendation letters to other teachers, give them that list or make a copy of it and send it on to them so that they don't struggle as well, because that's also saving them time, which you want them to have a good experience and be a good steward of their time, saving time so that they'll be willing to do it again, hopefully. Also, use your school's letterhead. Most schools have really great professional looking letterhead, and just grab, one sheet of that and keep it to where you can use it on a regular basis for your recommendation letters. Most of the recommendation letters that we get that have letterhead don't have like the school counselor's name on it, and so it doesn't have to be specific to you and your position. More than anything, it just really needs to look like it's from the school. We've received recommendation letters that were just on a blank sheet of paper, sometimes without a signature, and that's really hard. And I mentioned this in the presentation, that you are representing your school in the recommendation letter, and you're also in the recommendation letter representing the school's brand. And so steward that responsibility wisely. Help your school look as amazing as it is. Help your students look professional in the way that you're encouraging them to be by providing that for schools as well. And then include a sentence or two about why they would be a good fit. This is a tip that we see as an exception more than we see as common, but even if you don't know a whole lot about the institution that you're recommending them to, let them know why, some basic things, even if you have to ask the student, why are you interested in this school? Even if it's a program, recommend in the letter a word or two about why they would be a good fit for the science program or creative writing or engineering, that sort of thing, that would assist the review committee to really help in discerning that they would be a good fit. The next part, spell check. We've talked about this a little bit, but it is really important and makes a huge difference in, again, the professionalism. We recognize as institutions that you are working your tails off to get those things out the door or to delegate them and make sure that they've been turned in on time. But again, you're representing your school and yourself, and doing that just with a simple spell check that's already on our computers really assists in the professionalism of the entire process. And then we talked about this a little bit, including comments from other staff. And this year I've seen 3 that have been so great. And one of them was that our faculty members said they wish they could have cloned X, the student. And I mean, that's just such a nice touch on a recommendation letter that lists some important qualities about a student, but that a faculty member commented that they wanted to replicate a student. That's a really high honor and really gives us a good perspective on the student and the kind of asset they would be to our institution. And then this one, we get a lot of questions about, what if you don't know the student, or you really, there may not be a whole lot of things to write home about and sing about. And we really recommend several different avenues for that. One would be to touch base with the student about who they feel like some teachers would be that would be good recommenders for them. And then also perhaps organizationally, are they part of any organizations or clubs that would be good to connect that dot with? And then delegate that responsibility to that faculty member or staff member that takes care of that. And then if that's not an option, then sit down with the student and ask them some questions using the outline that we gave before about organizations that they're a part of, character traits that you can list, and ask them some strategic questions about those things so that when you are sitting down to do your rec letter, you have answers straight from them. And you don't have to spend 30 minutes interviewing them or talking to them, but just some simple questions about things that they enjoy. If they're interested in a particular program, why? Why would they want to enter into microbiology? What interests them about that? And those types of things really help. Again, not a lot of time, but just a little bit of time to make the investment really worthwhile for the student and then eventually for the institution. How to choose a recommender for a letter. And this would be something that might not necessarily be a tool that you would use, but if you have students that are really struggling with thinking of a teacher or an organizational leader that would help, these are some pointers that we point out that really help them determine whether or not they have someone other than you as a counselor to go to. And so we asked, was there a teacher that you clicked with and they saw your potential, they saw something about you that they absolutely loved. And then always, and I'm sure Jenica says this as well, ask early. Obviously, the earlier the better. That's fantastic. But even 2 to 4 weeks really helps give them time to write and then follow up after that. And then the best follow up we have found is when students not just ask or ask early, but really ask with a deadline indicating to them that you want to turn in your application by X date so that they know and have an idea that it's not just dangling out there, but that they understand that they're responsible for getting something in by a certain date, and that will help them tremendously. And if you are looking as a student, if the student's looking to fulfill a deadline that's not just an application deadline, but like a scholarship deadline, that's really important for the student to communicate, because professors and teachers typically want to honor a student's request to be able to seek scholarships, and they understand that this is part of that. And so throwing that in along with a deadline date is really important as a student. And then this is another tip that we found that at first doesn't sound right, but really has gleaned some great results for us is consider a teacher or a class that you really did not do well in, but have sought help in or did extra tutoring and really showed improvement. And those types of recommendation letters just make the student soar, because the professor or teacher is really able to identify how the student has improved, what they did, and really show some different distinctives for that student and how they've done better. And so while at first it may be a negative connotation to say, think of a class that you didn't do well in and then improved in, it really does help in the overall process, because those are the recommendation letters where you have teachers that just sing about success and about improvement and determination and hard work. And those are the types of students that you want to see in your institution. So consider that as well as you guide and help students understand who they should choose. Whoops. And then additionally, choose an advocate, someone who will cheer you on both an academic and social basis. And so teachers that can speak to the academic rigor of a student is really important, but ones that can also speak to the social rigor of a student is equally as helpful, because again, we see the academic side of who a student is, but understanding who they are from a social perspective, from a character perspective, values, that really assists in the process in understanding who the student is as a whole. And then again, assisting them in choosing someone if you don't know them very well, asking them those questions to help identify perhaps another person. Most schools do require recommendation letters to be from an academic person, a teacher, a guidance counselor. Most schools do not allow like a coach to be the primary letter of recommendation. But if you are able to have both of those, especially if there's been a scenario where a student was impacted by something greatly and they were able to improve and rise above the challenge, those types of recommendation letters are really helpful. So assist them in these ways by helping them to see who they should choose in the recommendation process. And most students don't really even think about, we have found, the fact that they have a choice in who the recommendation letter comes from. Most of them just automatically come to you as the guidance counselor and lay that responsibility on you. And so your ability to delegate and open their eyes to the options that they have will not only free up your time, but allow them to receive a recommendation letter from someone that really wants to cheer them on. Tips to avoid when writing a recommendation letter. We get some that are only 2 or 3 sentences, and that is not helpful. And so a little bit of description and outline, like we talked about, is very helpful. 2 to 3 sentences really is not a letter or a recommendation. That's more of a thought. Stagnant or generic letters where the name of the student changes, those are typically pretty obvious, and so be cognizant of that, including the wrong name or incorrect spelling of the student. And that's also something that we've seen, not very much, but some, addressing the wrong institution in a recommendation letter, and this is a little bit painful, so just be mindful of that as well. And then one that is really difficult for us is when there's a replication, essentially, of a leadership resume as the recommendation letter, and that Obviously, we acknowledge that counselors and teachers are really busy and it's difficult to take time to write these letters, but it really is a disservice to the student when we receive essentially replicate references for students. They've done a leadership resume and then someone else submits essentially the same thing. It doesn't tell us really who they are. And so offer that student an opportunity, set them up for success by avoiding some of these. And then the last part is a letter that is written in an unformatted way, a paragraph, no signature, no title. And we've received those as well. It's like someone opened a Word document and wrote a small paragraph and then just submitted it to the Common App. And so be cognizant of the student and how you are representing them at the school, but also yourself and the professionalism. We constantly encourage, and I know you do as well, students to be professional in everything that they do, and so assist them in that way by allowing them to really succeed through what you present as well as what they present. And then just some final thoughts. Recommendation letters are hard to write time after time, and we acknowledge that. We see that on an annual basis, and know that we are cheering for you and that we support you, and anything we can do to assist you, we are here for. They can be a challenge for us to read on a regular basis as well, but I'll tell you the descriptors that we've listed in this presentation really make reading them a joy. And so even though it's hard and it's time consuming and just difficult to think of new and creative things for every student, know that it is worthwhile and we appreciate it. And then just remember the recommendation letter really is an advocacy piece for the student. It is their opportunity to shine and be known as the person that they are, not just the academic venue that they show, but the actual person. And then we typically like to refer to the recommendation letter as a lighthouse. And so a lot of pieces make up the base and the structure of the lighthouse, but the light at the top of the lighthouse leads the way and points others who are not familiar with the student. And that's what the recommendation letter really is. There's a lot of basic structures that set up the success for the lighthouse and make it tall enough for people to see. But the light, the recommendation letter of who that student is, why they would be an asset to your institution, why you believe in them, the addition that they would be to a particular program, that is the light that helps us lead the way in terms of an institutional perspective of whether they would be a good fit at our institution. And so those are just some small words and ways of hopefully encouragement in terms of recommendation letters and tips. And my contact information, I think Jenica was going to put it up as well. If you need anything, I'm happy to chat through or talk through anything that might be helpful to you or ideas. And of course, above all, just know that we are really cheering for you and know that it is hard work. It is difficult work and definitely a challenge, and we're behind you and supporting you all the way. So if you have any questions, we're happy to answer those. If you want to write those in the chat, we'll do our best to answer those.
Thank you so much, Christy. That was some really helpful information. So you should all be able to use the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen. If it's collapsed, just click on, there should be some icons on the right-hand side that you can use to open that area up. We want to give you, if you're thinking of a question, we're going to give you definitely a few seconds to form that question and give it to us. So Christy, is your school, is it a Common Application school?
We are a Common App. We do have a Stanford app, but most of our students are Common App related.
So I actually have a question for you that I just received from a student. He had a teacher and a guidance counselor submit a letter to the Common Application where they specified the name of a school in the letter for early admissions. Now he's applying regular admissions, and these letters will not be acceptable for the other schools, and you can only upload one letter to the Common Application. So what does a teacher or counselor do if they would like to submit a different letter to an institution that hasn't yet received the application? Or do you know the answer to that?
In our case, and I would guess it would be similar, when that's happened, there's typically, for sure, contact your admissions counselor at the institution, and there's typically an email address that those types of documents are sent into. And the explanation from the counselor would be that the file uploaded to Common App was school specific, and now the student would like to broaden the opportunities and the institutions that they send those files to, and so attached is the recommendation letter. And that will help, if you send that directly to the school counselor, to the institutional admissions counselor, or to an email that they gave you for document upload, then that would be the route that I would go for that. And the student it would not be the first time or the first case that this had happened, and so that would allow that file to be added to what their profile would be, usually completing their file. That way it doesn't show as pending, without a completed profile.
Mm-hmm.
And we have both.
Yeah,
you can send them to me directly from the school, or you can send them to, we have an admission operations at Samford.edu email that every now and then, a student's not able to upload their documents to their status page and they panic, and so that's the email they can send those documents to, and it doesn't penalize them for not being able to upload it. And we're pretty transparent with our school counselors about using that email address as well.
Yeah, I think the concern there might be for some schools that get a really large volume of applications. Hopefully that sort of thing wouldn't fall through if it wasn't represented properly within the common application.
Well, and that's when making sure with the institutional counselor that they're sending it to the right place would really come into place, because what you don't want is, like you said, for it to be lost, but also you don't want to not send that sort of information and then their file isn't complete and they never really are tracked down or fall through the cracks anyway. So you as counselors are our best link to the students. And the reverse of that is also true, that admission counselors in universities and institutions are the best link for that. And so you utilize them, ask those questions, connect with them, get to know them, so that when a situation like that happens, you know exactly what to do for that institution or that case. If it's a special email address, if you upload it through a counselor portal, there's probably several options within different institutions.
Yeah, and I think then for the advice, because on one of the slides you had mentioned about speaking directly about a school, I think that maybe the caveat to that is unless it's a common application situation, right? Because that one letter is going to go to every school.
Absolutely. And, I'm sure every counselor has one student that they only want to apply to one school, and we always find that there's always, one or two students that they don't want to apply anywhere else, and that's great, that's fantastic, and that's when that would apply. And it's those situations that we accidentally see, another school or institution in there.
Yeah, that's one of those things that can play poorly and potentially hurt the student if you're not careful, right?
Yeah.
Depending on who's reading it on the other side.
But, in all honesty, any app reader or institutional admissions counselor knows that you guys are busy and knows that, it is more than a full-time job at this time of year trying to get everything in. But, making sure you have a relationship with key admissions counselors that you are sending a lot of your students to is really going to be important. Case in point, we at the beginning of the year host counselor luncheons in a lot of the major cities that we yield from, and that's not just to treat them because they deserve it, and they do, but also just to get to know them, because sometimes the counselors have changed, and those types of venues really allow counselors the opportunity to get to know the school and the counselor and to ask those types of questions. And so anytime a school offers you the opportunity to get to know the counselor or get to see the admissions personnel, take advantage of those opportunities.
Great. We haven't had any questions come in, which is shocking. Christy did a fantastic job, but I'm sure there are some questions out there. So we'll give you a few more moments to potentially put your questions in, and I'll go over the last slide while you're doing that. So this is just some information about connecting with Education USA. So we do these webinars frequently, once or twice a month usually. We always have a great expert like Christy, or sometimes myself, give the webinar, and to give you some more background information about various program types, things that you should be doing as counselors, or things that students should be doing. Our next webinar is about understanding dual degree programs. So I feel like I get a lot of questions about, oh, I want to do a BSMD, I want to do a JD MBA. And so we're going to have some folks on from the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, which is part of the CUNY system, City University of New York. And they're going to describe dual degree programs and just help get a deeper understanding of what they are and how to apply to them. And it's going to be at both the undergraduate and graduate level. So this is actually a really good one for you as counselors and for your students to consider. That's coming up already in just a couple weeks on December 15th. And then there's a whole host of ways to get a hold of me. My email address is in the bottom right-hand corner there, ottawa@educationusa.info. And then just, I mean, look at that. You can tweet me, you can Instagram me, you can check out my website. Definitely give this information to your students, and you've also seen the YouTube channel here, which is where the recording of this video will be. Anybody who's in the room now or who registered for the event will receive a link to the recording, and you can also request a PDF of the slideshow if you would like. We haven't received any more questions, so I think we'll go ahead and we'll wrap it up. And if you'd like to follow up with either me or Christy, we're both willing to answer your questions. Thank you so much, Christy. We appreciate the information, and thank you all for joining us.